Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are finally headed to get the results from tuning my big turbo 340i on ethanol. If you guys haven't seen, a couple months ago I posted the numbers that the car made on pump gas, so if you're curious how fast it was, how much power it made on 93 octane, you can definitely go and check that video out. But since then we've been tuning it on ethanol to dial in the flex fuel, and now we're finally going to go get some dyno numbers, and I'll also share some Dragy results as well. Now I know it's been a really long time, trust me, nobody wanted this tune to be done faster than I did, except for maybe my tuner, but we just ran into a lot of roadblocks and issues throughout the way, and like I talked about in the past, sometimes this is how it goes, especially when upgrading your car, things can happen. So we're headed to the shop now to get the dyno done. I just filled up with fuel, and on the way I'll explain the tuning process, what my setup is, the issues we ran into and how we fixed them, and then we'll go through the actual results for tuning this car on E85. So thank you guys for sticking with me for this long, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. Now to start off, again for everybody that's new, I'll explain the setup on the car really quickly. So this is a 2016 BMW 340i. It is rear wheel drive and it has the 8-speed automatic transmission. The engine is stock, the transmission is stock, but the big thing that a lot of you are looking for is it has the dynamic AutoWorks turbo. I'm running the UltraFlow X, so it is the newest generation of turbos that they make, but the smallest one of their new options. And the reason I went with this route is because, again, it does have a stock engine and stock transmission. I'm not planning on building or upgrading either of those anytime soon, so I felt like this turbo was more than capable of maxing out the limitations of my setup. It also will have the quickest spool, which I do track days with my car, and so I want something that can spool quickly and give me a good amount of torque coming out of turns and stuff like that. So this seemed like the perfect turbo for my needs, and that's why I ended up going with this one. Now we also have a bunch of supporting mods. Back when I was stock turbo, you guys might remember I installed the Bimmer Network intake manifold with port injection. I have 750cc injectors on the manifold, and all of that is controlled by a motive reflex. And then I also have Kelford stage 1 cams, so it's the smallest cams they make. I think it's rated for around like 500 to 600 horsepower. So entry level, most people go with stage 2 or stage 3 now that we know the stage 1s don't make a significant amount of power, especially on stock turbo. But I'm curious to see if we see anything out of the ordinary or unexpected now that we're tuning it on a big turbo setup. Other than that, I have the basic bolt-ons. I have a race ready performance intake, race ready performance downpipe, and AWE muffler. I have a titanium charge pipe as well, so a lot of that doesn't really make power, but just kind of supporting mods to make sure the turbo can breathe as good as possible and give me as much headroom as possible. And that's kind of where we started tuning. Now again, earlier this year you guys saw the numbers I made on pump gas. All of that was basically just done with the existing hardware, but once we started tuning on ethanol, I actually had a track day coming up, so I had to go back to pump gas. So that was already my first delay. It took me a while to get back to it because it's like a week or a week and a half of running out the ethanol, doing my track day on pump gas, then getting back to ethanol tuning. Except at the track day, that's when I had my wastegate issue with the turbo. So I ended up waiting about 2 weeks to get that fixed, got the replacement or fixed turbo back from Dynamic AutoWorks, swapped that in, put ethanol back in the car, and then we were back to tuning. So at that point, the car was feeling pretty good. You know, with MHD, their flex fuel tuning allows you to hit a target mix in the middle and then go for full E85. So we started with E40, and even on E40, we hit the limits of our fuel system. The stock low-pressure fuel pump could not keep up with the amount of boost I was able to make safely on an ethanol mix. Now, I want to reiterate, if you're making as much power as you want, you don't necessarily need a low-pressure fuel pump upgrade. But the way that my tune is set up, the AFRs that we were requesting, and how much boost we were asking, it was overwhelming the low-pressure fuel pump. So again, I had to wait for my fuel pump to come in, wait to run out the ethanol in my car so I wouldn't dump fuel on the ground while I was installing it. Got that installed, and then we got back to tuning. Then after that, we started going up higher in ethanol content, and we started seeing that the turbo was like hitting the limits of wastegate duty cycle. It was getting to 100% way sooner than we anticipated. And so I reached out to Dynamic Auto Works, and he was recommending an intake upgrade for anybody that's pushing higher boost levels, like in the 30s or even the high 20s. It's good to make sure that the turbo can breathe as much as possible. It'll improve your spool and stuff like that. So I upgraded to this intake, and I'll have a link to it down in the description if you guys are interested in adding this to your car. It does drop into pretty much most, if not all, intake setups. I have the Race Ready Performance one, so it's kind of like that MST style intake. It didn't fit the cover when I first put it on there, so I've left the cover off, but I've since been able to adjust it, and I know other people are able to keep the cover on as well. So me personally, I just leave the cover off because I never felt the need to put it back on, but it should fit in the box that actually comes with the intake. So if you guys want that, that's definitely a good intake to run. It has a velocity stack, it has a larger element so it can intake more air, and all of it did help improve the car. It dropped wastegate duty cycle a couple percent, so we could safely continue pushing the car. Then after that, I had almost everything dialed in, and we just were testing the car, seeing how boost could ramp in and keep everything safe but make as much power as possible. And the car just kept having issues with misfires, and this was extremely frustrating. I was feeling the roughness in the car, and then eventually it started throwing cylinder 4 misfire codes. And when we were doing research, we found that there was actually a motive firmware update that can cause these misfires. And so we updated the firmware to the latest one, updated my map to match the firmware, and all of that went away. So if you guys are dealing with random misfires after pushing higher boost levels, I'm not sure exactly what was causing it, but there was definitely a software or firmware issue in my motive reflex that was contributing to it. At least it was always cylinder 4 in my case, and when we were looking it up, it seemed like a lot of other people were having that issue as well. So got the firmware updated, put that on the car, started pushing again. Then we started identifying boost leaks, so I had to fix those boost leaks. And I guess you might see a trend here because these are videos that I've made recently over the past couple weeks. You should note that most of the videos I make, it's because I'm having issues with my car, not necessarily just something that I want to do for fun. I try not to change stuff that's working. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That's my philosophy. But if you see me making a video fixing something, it's probably an issue that I've had with my car personally, or like a friend's car, whoever I'm working on. So that's where those videos came from. It's because I was working through these issues while tuning my car on ethanol. So got through all of that, started feeling good. Then we started hitting fuel limits again. My low pressure fuel system was dropping, which didn't really make sense. We knew that we had just installed our low pressure fuel pump and it was working fine. And sometimes I would be fine, the pull would work well. Other times fuel pressure would drop and it didn't make sense. So we came to the conclusion that the low pressure fuel pump wasn't always activating. I double checked my hardware, I swapped relays, I did everything else, and I just could not figure out what the issue was. And I was getting ready to actually replace my motive reflex box until Trevor over at Bimmer Network, who knew he was such a mad genius, he said, check the fuel pump itself. So I pull it out of the basket and I was messing with the wires a little bit. And while I was messing with it, I found that one of the wires had come disconnected. So I don't know if it got cut when I was handling it or got tugged on something, or maybe the crimp wasn't tight enough. But once I fixed that, I replaced those connectors, reinstalled it in the car, and I had no more issues with low pressure fuel. It was perfectly reliable. Everything was working the way that it should. So it was really interesting how much I was able to tune the car and make power. Most of my issues were just trying to make it more consistent and reliable and make sure that everything was completely solid. And I think I mentioned this to a couple of you guys, like we're fine tuning things, being that it's not that the car isn't making power, that the turbo isn't working or something blew up. It's just like I kept running into these little nitpick issues. And this is something that can happen to anybody, including me. So hopefully if you guys are going on this journey, you have the patience that I had. We finally got it to a point where it works consistently. The car pulls strong. I'm really excited to see how much power it puts down because I know, at least from the driver's seat, it feels really good. So let's go ahead. We're almost at Eurocharge. We'll get the car on the rollers and see how much power it's making. A little more. So those are the numbers. It actually ended up exactly where I wanted it. You know, I was hoping for around 650 horsepower, 600 foot-pounds, and it was just under those numbers on the top run. So the first one, of course, we did it with the hood closed, and then I asked them if we could do it with the hood open just to see if it picked up any power, having the intake open, having the intake manifold not cooking, you know, and just getting some airflow. So that's what we're working with here, and I was very happy with it. 644, 587, that's good enough for me. It makes plenty of power to enjoy the car. Shouldn't be too much torque to overwhelm the transmission if I were to do a wide open throttle shift to 6th gear, which I have genuinely been scared to do until I saw the numbers and knew exactly where the power was. But yeah, and I mean, this isn't like a crazy tune. We were deliberately trying to make sure that we kept torque at a safe limit for the stock transmission. So it starts in like the mid 20s of boost pressure, and then it ramps up towards 31 PSI at the top, hitting around 15 degrees of timing on full E85. So yeah, for me, that's a win-win. Now, luckily for you, I also got some Dragy numbers for those of you that don't care about dynos. And so here are the Dragy times I made. And yeah, so again, Dragy numbers were where I wanted them to be. I wanted to get into the 6s, and that was right into the 6s. Keep in mind, again, you know, it's full weight car, all that jazz, me as a driver. So I'm very happy with how it performed. The only thing I was kind of disappointed about was when I went and looked at the metric numbers and realized like it was that close to being a 5-second 100 to 200, and it's like, okay, now I might go try a couple times later on with better temperatures and stuff like that to see if I can get some better times. But, you know, nighttime in the summer, temps aren't too cold or anything. It was around, I think, 70 degrees. So typical of what you would see for an average commute and average temperatures you might experience. So yeah, definitely happy with those times. Now, just as a final thought, I want to add to you guys that with this turbo, if you don't want 600 wheel horsepower, if you don't want 600 foot-pounds of torque, you don't have to have it. Again, when you saw my pump gas numbers, that was on a low boost tune. I was doing about 20 PSI. So if you wanted more boost than that, you can. If you want less boost than what I'm running now, you can. You really need to plan out your entire build around your goals. Most of my focus was making sure that I could do this performance on full E85, but I absolutely could have hit these numbers on an ethanol mix without the low pressure fuel pump upgrade. And if I would have upgraded my TU pump to like a Dort Stage 2, then I could have avoided having to add port injection. There are just so many different ways that you can make power on these cars, and it doesn't mean that you need to do everything I did just to use the turbo. I highly recommend, again, figure out your goals. If you want a certain amount of power, if you want to hit a certain time at the drag strip, a certain trap speed, if your friend just bought a Z01 and you want to beat him whatever that might be. Just make sure you plan out your goals, figure out what you want, and then build your car around those goals, and you can have success with pretty much any setup out there. So thank you again to Dynamic AutoWorks for trusting me to test out this turbo. Sorry it took so long to get this data out. Thank you to Subpart Tuning for tuning the car and getting me all set up, and for all of you guys for watching and being as patient as you have been to let me get these numbers to you once I got everything dialed in and at a point where I was comfortable it was a consistent and safe setup. So I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps, and if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.